Hello, welcome to Kerbal Space Program with Nitro. This is episode 1 of a video series I'm starting, Kerbal Space Program. This first episode is going to be a kind of a tutorial for new players so you can get a feel for the game, how it works, how to build your first rocket, get it up into orbit, deorbit it, and then land safely back at Kerbal Space Station. So let's get started. Choose any flag you want, but I made a custom one in Photoshop here with the Predator. So here's the main screen of Kerbal Space Program. Right here in the middle we have the vehicle assembly building, which leads out to the launch pad. Over here on the left we have the spaceplane hangar, the astronaut complex, and on the right we have our tracking station and the mission control building, which isn't going to be used until a future update. So let's get started in the vehicle assembly building and building our first rocket. Over here on the left-hand side, you're going to have all your parts, and then you have your new load, save, and then launch sections up here. And then this stuff you won't really use much except for maybe your action groups, and then going back to the parts. I haven't really messed with the crew tab a whole lot yet. Well, let's build our first rocket. So let's select this command pod and put a parachute on it. You notice like all the parts will snap onto an object. Red means that you can't put on there, green is good, and it snaps to it. You can just click it off into space anywhere you want if you want to save a part in the scene. Clicking and dragging it over into this area and then clicking it will delete that object from the screen. Use the right mouse button to roll around the screen. Pushing down on the middle mouse button will zoom you in and out. And then rolling your wheel up and down will like pan it up and pan it down. So let's put a parachute on this pod over here in the utility section. Click on the pod to move everything attached to it up. And let's attach a rocket. I'm gonna go ahead into the propulsion tab and we're gonna use this Rocket Max large solid fuel booster. Snap that to the bottom of a rocket and we're done. This is pretty much the most basic rocket you can build in the whole game, and it'll get us up into the air. Now over here on the right hand side you're going to notice your staging. You got a minus button to delete a stage and then a plus button to add a stage. Reset resets everything. So go ahead and hit the plus button to add a stage and then click on the solid fuel booster to select it and then click and drag it to the new stage. This is very important that you double check your staging like as much as you possibly can, because whenever you add or delete things from the scene, it'll more than likely screw up your staging. So don't really worry about your staging until all the way at the very end, and always double check everything, otherwise your rocket could explode upon takeoff. But this is good enough for now, so let's go ahead and save this. We're going to title this thing Up, because that's where we're going, right up into the air. Hit the save button over here to save it, and then this green button will launch. Alright, so here we are at our launch pad. You can still use your scroll wheel on your mouse to zoom in. Right button rolls around the screen, and then clicking and holding the middle mouse button now kind of does a look that goes up and down. You kind of have to climb up your screen with the look if you want to move all the way to the up of a large craft or down to a large craft. You use the right mouse button to look down, and then you use the middle mouse button to pan it up, and then you can like pan it a lot. And it works. Over here you'll notice our first astronaut, Jebediah. He's a default first fearless astronaut that you get. Right down here in the middle you have your nav ball. This points you in whichever direction that you want to go. So all the way down here on the bottom is actually north. Use your WASD keys to move around when your rocket's flying in the air. You have your speed in meters per second. And then up here where it says surface will change depending on where you are. So When you're on the surface of a world, it'll say surface. When you're out into orbit, it changes to orbit. And then when you're heading close to a target for intercepts, it'll change to target speed. And down here you have your degrees, as into how many degrees you are rotated along the nav ball. Over here on the left, you got your staging, your yaw, roll, and pitch, and then what stage you're currently on in these numbers. And over here you have your stage button, docking button, orbital map. You can also go to the orbital map by hitting the M key on your keyboard, and that brings you to your world where you can see all the planets, but we're not going to worry about that yet. Hit M again to go back. Up here on the top right, we have a resources tab. This shows everything that is a resource that's on your current craft. So we have a little bit of electric charge and enough solid fuel to get us somewhere. Up here in the top middle, you have your lights, your gears, and your brakes, but gears and brakes really won't be used much aside from space planes. Lights will turn on all the lights on your craft if it has any. Here in the atmosphere, you can tell how thick the atmosphere is wherever you're at. The atmosphere of the Kerbal world tends to end around 69,000 to 70,000 meters. And over here on the top left, you have your time warp, which allows you to skip ahead in time depending on which arrow button you press. And the maximum time warp skips ahead in like a couple days per second. So you want to be careful whenever using that. But that's enough of that. Let's get this thing into orbit. So, well, not orbit, but it'll be going up. So you press T and R on your keyboard to activate RCS and SAS, but we don't have any RCS, so we'll just use SAS for now. We don't have any throttleable engines on this yet, if that's a word, so we don't really have to worry about this much, but use Shift and Control on your keyboard in order to throttle it up and throttle it down. Holding down or pressing the cap lock key and then using your WASDs will soften the controls if you're flying and you want to make careful adjustments, but we don't need any of that right now. So, to activate the first stage, you hit the space bar, and this thing will be going up in the air. To activate the next stage, you hit space bar again. I'm actually turning it manually now with the D key. Hit M to go to the map and you can see how far up you're going to go. This AP is your apoapsis. This is the highest point in your parabolic arc. And at this rate, we're going to land somewhere out here in the ocean, but we won't want to do that. Good. Speed this up as much as we can. So there we go. This is our first rocket. Went all the way up into the air, and now it's coming all the way back down because we don't have any fuel or anything to achieve orbit. So now I'm going to hit the space bar to activate our parachute. And That'll slow us down. The solid booster more than likely get destroyed upon impact, but that's okay. And there we go. We have landed almost safely, but safely enough to where Jebediah is still alive. And that there is our first rocket. But we don't want to do that. We want to get into orbit. So you hit escape to bring up your pause menu, and we're going to go back to and revert flight and revert to vehicle assembly. Alright, so now let's build a rocket that'll actually make it into orbit, achieve orbit, and then land safely back down here at the space station. So hit the new button to make a new rocket. And we'll go ahead and use the same pod that we used before on the first one, and we'll attach the same parachute that we had before onto this one. But now we're going to add some more stuff to it. Let's go ahead and give it a battery just so it has a little bit more power. And we'll go ahead, this thing already has SAS on it, so we'll go to propulsion. Don't need a whole lot of fuel, so I'm just going to take this little tiny fuel tank here and this little liquid fuel engine and attach that there. And there we go. This is going to be what'll propel us once we get this thing into orbit. That should be plenty for the tiny craft like this. I'm not going to put any RCS on this thing because it doesn't really need it for what we're going to do. Alright, so now I'm going to go into the structural tab and choose one of these stacked decouplers so we can decouple our craft. You'll notice that the red arrows here indicate which way the decoupled part is going to eject out of. So if you ever want to orient things differently on your craft, make sure that that's pointing in the way that you want those parts to eject from. And that's only with the red couplers. The blue couplers separate things in both directions, but with a lot less force. Alright, so let's put a larger engine on this. Now here's something very important that you probably won't see a whole lot everywhere, but whenever you put one of these big orange fuel tanks on here and then you want to put a 1500 Rocket Max engine, this 1500 engine will pretty much always overheat at maximum output when it runs off of just this fuel tank. Now there's a way that you can prevent that. I'm not entirely sure if it was intended or if it's kind of like a coding error. But if you put any one of these larger fuel tanks on there, it will never overheat. So I'm going to grab a double and then attach that there. And now that I added this extra fuel tank on here, that engine can run at max power and it'll never overheat. So always make sure that you do that whenever you want to build something a little bit more powerful and you want to use these 1500 engines. Always attach them to one of these fuel tanks like that one there, or that one there, or that one there. Any one of these 3 fuel tanks I have sitting out here will prevent that thing from overheating at max output. And they do add a little bit more weight, so you kind of want to be conscious of that. Alright, so now we have this. Let's give it a little bit more power, because I'm not sure this will be quite enough. So I'm going to grab one of these hydraulic detachment manifolds. And down here at the bottom we have our symmetry mode. Now you have your angle snap and your regular rotation. So when it's at a circle like this, you can move it anywhere you want on the object and it won't snap anything. And when you have the angled hexagon there, it'll snap like that in different directions. So I'm going to, when you click on this, it'll change it up to 8 times symmetry. But I only want 4 for this, and I'm just going to align these kind of on this dark orange band here. And then go back to propulsion and add these solid fuel boosters. And then go ahead and make them aerodynamic just because we can. I'm not sure how this thing will sit on the launch pad, so over here in the structural tab on the second page you have this launch stability enhancer. I'm going to go ahead and put 4 of these on here, just in case. And now that should be plenty in order to get this thing into orbit and land back down here at the Kerbal Space Center. So what we're going to do now is make sure you double check your staging. Even though I attached it to this, it's still going to be up here in stage 2, which we don't want. Always make sure that you're that these red what are they called again? Launch stability enhancers. These red docking clamps here, we'll call them. Make sure that they're always on your bottom stage, otherwise they'll hold the craft in place and it won't leave the ground or it'll rip itself apart. So make sure those are down there, and then as you mouse over these you'll notice that they highlight up. That's how you can easily identify what they are if you have a bunch of parts and you're not really sure what's what. Or if you mouse over the part, it highlights it over there on the right hand side. So we got our fuel boosters on here, those should be good. On the bottom, that's in stage 2, we want all that there. These 4 decouple those, I already know that. Last one is a center one, and then we want to add a new stage, and then move this little rocket in here to that, and then the last stage of course will be our parachute for when we want to land back down to the ground. Alright, so let's call this thing Orbit 1. Because it will go into orbit, and save, and launch. Looks like it's sitting okay. Make sure you hit T before you launch anything to activate your SAS. Again, we don't have any RCS yet, so we don't have to worry about that. I'm going to go over the gravity turn when you go to launch a craft into orbit. It's always best to kind of turn one way or the other with the planet, east or west, depending on which way you like to go. I generally like to turn west. So when you launch, you want to make sure that you move this little orange marker here over to the right hand side, because that is actually to the west, I believe. Yes, I believe that's north. So anyways, whichever direction it is, it doesn't matter. You just want to turn one way or the other when you get up there at about, I like to turn around 10,000 meters. That's usually a good solid number, but we'll go ahead and do that. You shift here to move your throttle up. We want it throttle up to full because that's controlling this engine only. These are solid fuel, so once you hit them, they go and they're gone for good. So let's go ahead and fire this thing up. So we only want to get it up to about 70,000. You can hit this little arrow here to bring up your nav ball while you're flying, and that looks good. So now I'm going to head all the way over to that right side, and there we go. And you can just mouse over your Apple apps as to watch how high you're going, and then You can control your craft right here. You don't even have to look at it. Whoa, boy. That's screwed up. I don't think I'm going to be able to pull out of this. Maybe I will. Come on. This thing's a little heavy to control here. That's what happened. It actually flipped all the way over. There we go. Alright, so our little pod is free. There it goes. Oh man. Yep. Alright, so that actually worked out pretty good. That's a lot more altitude than I ever thought I'd get out of that little engine. 218,000. That is insane. I'm going to try to bring that down. All I'm doing is moving with the WASD here so I can move this on the nav ball because I know where that's pointing. I'm pointing it down towards the planet so I can try to bring this apoapsis down, hopefully, here. That is a bit high. Check my fuel. I don't have a whole lot of fuel for this. It's about good. Alright, so we don't have an orbit yet, but that's okay. I'm going to go over the first maneuver node here. So the best way to do maneuvers is on the maximum points of your parabolic arc. So we're going to plop a maneuver down here at the apoapsis, and you just click with your left mouse button, click add maneuver, and you get this crazy little ball that comes up here. So the purple up and down is inclination change, and that changes rotation, so it would grab this and it would rotate it around that point. We don't want to do that. The blue ones will move the whole entire arc back and forth, and you won't really use this a whole lot unless you're doing like planetary approaches, in which case I find that very useful. Just go ahead and hit the X there to delete it. Alright, but what we actually want to do is we want to grow this out so we can achieve orbit. So you're going to use these green markers here. So just grab one of these and you move it out until you see that little PE at the end. And that's at 179. And when they spin like that, that means that you're approaching a pretty much circular orbit. They're 197, 199, that is pretty darn good. I will take that any day. So hit M to go out. And then over here on the nav ball, you'll see this little blue marker, and that's your target marker. You want to try to aim right in the center of that at all times when you're doing the burn. And now you notice a couple things. Over here you got your estimated burn time, which doesn't have a number yet because we're not burning. It tells you your time to the node, so this is your countdown timer down here, and then it tells you how fast you need to go in that direction in order to achieve the maneuver that you plop down. So I'm going to go ahead and speed it up here till about 1 minute. Alright, that's good, 30 seconds. And then I like to do maneuvers in the actual orbital map because then I can see the blue line update in real time and I'm not like just watching my ship burn. I can actually see what's going on. So I'm going to do this in the orbital map here, and when that hits about 5 seconds, I'm going to burn early and grow this parabolic arc out so we actually have periapsis. Here we go. Full throttle. That's going to go really quick. Now I can check my periapsis. Just watch that grow. And there it is. That's a little bit much, but perfect. Take it. Close that maneuver node out, and there we go. We have a fairly circular orbit. It's good enough. Off by a couple thousand. Who cares? If you ever wanted to make it perfectly circular, you go back over here to your apoapsis and just add another maneuver and do the exact same thing. Just kind of grow it out until they flip like that. And then if you have two markers over the same point, you'll see that your current marker is displayed on the top and your new marker is displayed underneath that. So that Kerbal apoapsis at 215,000 would actually be the new apoapsis after you execute the maneuver. So sometimes that can get a little hectic, but that's okay. But I'm not going to circularize this because it's good enough as it is. We don't have a whole lot of fuel in this little fuel tank. So we're going to go ahead and land all the way back down at the Kerbal Space Center. Now, on the planet Kerbal, the Kerbal Space Center is right here, kind of on the little tip of this Africa-looking continent. So right there in that little patch of brown right there is where we're going to try to aim. And we're going to do that with the exact same maneuver node that I just plopped down over here. Yeah. So we're going to drag the other part on the green down to about like that. Now you're going to want to overshoot whenever you enter planets because this doesn't calculate the drag that you're going to get from entering the atmosphere. So I'm actually going to aim this all the way out here in the ocean, and then by the time we slow down, that's going to put it pretty much right on the money, hopefully. So let's go ahead and speed it up. And you just click on the time warp up here to speed it up. I like to actually click on these buttons instead of using the keyboard shortcuts because I feel like I have more control over here about which one I'm on. I can stop it on a dime instead of mashing the keys. Alright, so that's a minute. We can go ahead and look back at our pretty little space pod here. We're already aimed right at our markers, so we're good. Speed this up a little bit. Go back to the map and start our burn. That's a bit much. I'm actually gonna burn in the opposite direction now. Alright, that should be good. We got enough fuel if we need to make a little adjustment. I'm actually trying to land pretty much right within the vicinity of the Kerbal Space Center. Hopefully we'll make it. I should have enough fuel in this little guy. Oh yeah, already got half fuel there, so we should be good. Jebediah is loving it. Alright. One little thing I guess I should go over here on your nav ball, you'll notice this little green marker, and that's your prograde marker. That indicates which direction you're currently headed in, and it's always going to be kind of like this open circle. Now on the opposite side of that, you have your retrograde marker, and this one, it's kind of hard to see, but there's actually an X that goes through that, and that indicates that that's your opposite direction of travel. So if you ever want to slow down, you know, these are separated pretty much into hemispheres. So if you're anywhere on the right side of that dot, I'm going to be moving towards the direction that I'm going prograde. But if I'm anywhere on the left side, I'll be heading retrograde, so I'll be slowing down. And so that applies to pretty much anywhere on the nav ball. You'll also see the same thing occur if you have a target set, but we don't need to really worry about that yet. Just have a beautiful planet. I kind of wanted to fly a plane over into this little area over here and see what all is over there. Also on this island. We'll do that in a later episode. I'll build a plane and fly it on over there. Alright, so let's speed this up. It automatically exits you at a time warp whenever you have an encounter or whenever you're entering atmosphere, something happens, and then this will change to a physical time warp, which only allows you to accelerate 4 times maximum. So right now, it doesn't look like we're going to land near Kerbal Space Center because this is actually going to slow us down probably somewhere in the mountains. So I'm going to see if I can drag that up a little bit by burning prograde. Now that might seem excessive, but it's actually not, because right now we're only at 51,000 meters and we're already entering the atmosphere. You just hit F2 at any time, turns off your heads-up display, and then hit F2 to bring it right back up again. But I don't need to look at that. See, it's already going back down as we're getting deeper and deeper into the thicker atmosphere. It's going to slow us down, hopefully right on the money. Certainly going that way. I'm going to probably try to use a combination of the rocket fuel while we're in atmosphere and some angling to see if we can put it right down, like right in the middle of the Space Center would be very nice. So here we're entering the atmosphere. We got our cool re-entry effects going on. It's burning up. Jebediah don't care. It's actually not slowing us down a whole lot because this is a pretty small surface area craft, but that's okay. Oh man. I'm gonna try to burn to grow that out a little bit while it slows us down. Hopefully I can plop this down there. Oops, wrong way. I'm trying to do on the fly inclination changes here to get us back over to Space Center. That looks really good. Stay there. Ran out of fuel. Oh well. Yep, all out. So there's our Space Center. Those are actually the clamps that held our ship in place when we first launched off. So that's what you're seeing right here. That little white marker there is a debris marker. So 63 kilometers away. Yeah, we're not going to make it. We'll land over here somewhere in the plains. That's okay. At least it'll be a soft landing, I hope. As long as we skip over these mountains, we'll be alright. I have landed on the side of a mountain before, which was a little nerve-wracking, but it actually managed to stay, so everyone survived. I'm not going to deploy the parachute until a little later, because we still got, another 10,000 meters to go. Go ahead and speed that up. That's good. Parachute deployed. It's gonna destroy our engine, but it should slow us down enough. Oh yeah. We'll be fine. See our shadow over here on the ground. 9.1 meters a second is pretty good for a landing. 8.9 now. That's alright. Yep, blew our engine up, but that's okay. The pods are fine. So there we go. That's our first orbital craft. We made a successful orbit around Kerbin. I showed you guys some maneuver nodes and how to get up into space with a very simple rocket. In the next episode, we'll build something a little bit more complex, and we'll go ahead and travel over to Minmus, and we'll be doing a landing on Minmus, which actually on our map is further out than the moon, but it is the easier moon to land on if you're new to the game. I'll be landing on the moon after I do a Minmus landing, but stay tuned for next episode. That's all the time I have for you right now. See you guys later.